Hey folks, welcome back to the Cruz Family Weekly Talk Show with me as your host Jesse. Last week we interviewed Winston Smith from the 1984 by George Orwell. We're stepping away from that and heading into the 1100s. Today we have Thomas Becket from Murder in the Cathedral, who will be talking to us about his life and story.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. I'm glad to travel to the future for this talk.
The pleasure is all mine. Let's hop right into it. I'll ask you a series of short questions, and all you need to do is answer them quickly just so the audience can get a feel of who you are. It shouldn't be too long.
I got it.
Let's start with where it all began. When were you born?
I was born in 1118.
Where were you born?
I was born in the UK, so specifically London, but in a cheap town called Cheapside.
Can you tell us about life as a young child?
So definitely. So as a child growing up, I was born into this climate where the political climate was basically it was very structured, and so what happened was that we were ruled over a feudal rule, so it was under a king, and so what happened was that we were under a hierarchy, and so my social classes, for example, like mine, since I was born into a lower social class, we didn't have much social mobility, so life was kind of hard for us back then.
So, about your family, did your parents push you to pursue anything as a child?
Yes, my parents actually adamantly pursued for me to receive a higher education. It even went to the point where they sent me off to Paris, France to pursue a higher education. And from there, I actually learned Latin and classical Old English text, which in the future would actually help me with my reputation as an archbishop.
So, what did you learn while studying over there?
So it was a straightforward work and the basics of education like anyone else would get in the 1100s. And like I said, I learned Latin, the full text of it, and I also learned a lot of Old English literature texts.
So, can you tell me about your life when you came back to England?
When I returned, it was straightforward, and it wasn't as strenuous as I would think. It was more the fact that I actually got a post under the current Archbishop Theobald, and from there, I kind of just expanded and rose up the social ladder.
Did this post under Theobald help you climb up the social hierarchy?
Actually, it did. Once I actually started working, I started to work closely with King Henry, and so from there we had a relationship where we actually bonded and connected really fast. And from there, he even eventually after that he named me Chancellor of Canterbury.
So, what happened then? Did you advance up more of the social ladder, and how did you feel?
I did, and unfortunately, after the death of my mentor, I became the Archbishop of Canterbury, which was the highest religious position that could be right under the Pope. And honestly, I felt invigorated only because I never thought I could make it that far. Being born from a poor family in a very poor town in England, it was really surprising and unfortunate that my mentor died. But I'm really grateful for the position that I held.
So, what happened during your time as an archbishop?
So a lot happened, honestly. When I got the position, I felt drawn and devoted my entire time to God. I felt that no one else, other than the king or anyone else, was higher than God. And so my devotion was very strong religiously. And my feelings and emotions for the church were heavily emphasized. And it was a sharp because we had disagreements with the church and the kingdom. But honestly, it allowed me to realize new experiences and new paths spiritually.
So, did any conflicts grow from this result?
Unfortunately, yes. The viewpoints of Henry and I, we conflicted back and forth because he wanted. The whole reason why he put me into the position of Archbishop was only because he wanted to use that advantage power so the church would bow down to his rule, his more secular rule, since he wanted more of a government structured society. But I wouldn't allow him to do that, and honestly, I couldn't just allow another mortal being who isn't God to just take place and believe that he is God by taking over control of the church. But honestly, I found it very insulting, and that's where we had conflicts, even to the point where I fled and left to France for a little bit. In my personal opinion, he was a spoiled brat.
So, how did you feel?
To be blunt, I felt betrayed by him. I had such a strong connection with Henry, and I felt that our relationship would actually work out only because we wanted to better the relations with the church and the kingdom. But in the end, he only turned out to be a bratty tyrant, in my opinion. If you knew him personally, you would know that I've known him for a long time, and I don't know. I was just shocked to see it because he wanted me to bend the rules for him, and I felt betrayed by that. And I felt that only God can tell me what to do, honestly. Like, that's like the spiritual being. I stayed true to myself spiritually and individually, and so I got through it all, and I'm truly grateful for that. But I had to flee the country because of it.
So what happened after? How did your relationship end, or did it get fixed or resolved?
Well, evidently, I was murdered in a cathedral, and hence the title from where I came from, Murdered in the Cathedral. Henry spoke some words at an event. It was a speech, I believe, where he wanted me gone, in a sense. And so his night henchmen took it literally and had a hunt towards me, and so they found me, and that's where I was actually brutally murdered within the cathedral. But after that happened, I became a saint, and I was remembered for my accomplishments and everything that I've done. And so, in a way, that kind of hurt Henry because he was left in the dust while I was celebrated in a way. So, even though I'm dead, I was still celebrated as a saint. So, in the end, I didn't get what I wanted, but Henry didn't get what he wanted either.
Well, isn't that interesting? Such a brew of tea filling up in this room. Well, that's all we have the time today, folks. I thank you, Thomas, for taking the time travel and being here, even though you are technically dead.
Of course, thank you for bringing me back. I really appreciate it.